50% of your fractures produce 80% of your hydrocarbons.
That lends a lot of credibility. If you come in and can be upfront and honest and say, actually in this application, I think this product over here that I don't represent would be better for you. That all of a sudden now you become a trusted advisor rather than a salesman.
And I often say that we have all the requirements of space, right? Because it has to go underground and send us data from miles and miles away, and it has to work. Like, failure is not an option.
We'll put on, a standard mule shoe. Ours is slightly different just for that, but it's, everybody's got one.
The top drive and the drawworks really don't care whether the electrons coming at it are from a joystick or a PLC.
The panel, what you see here on the left, which is now controlled by one of my students, is showing you actually the control of our brakes.
As of now, geothermal is a pretty small market.
If you have tortuosity, the casing will be up against the side on part of the well. There won't be any cement there. The cement will have crescent around it.
So managed pressure drilling, it's been defined as a process to precisely control the pressure profile in the wellbore.
The key is being transparent with our clients in this case. So tell them what happened. If we had a failure, tell them exactly what happened. Whether it's our fault, whether it's whatever the issue was, we need to be transparent.
I think it's very important for everyone in the industry to know what's out there and kind of what's happening downhole as well.
I've probably worked on over 40 different performance limiters in my career. If I miss any of those, and the computer is raising weight on bit, and I miss any of those, I have a train wreck. Computer's going in the ocean.
Here's your new colors, here's your new thing. We don't do that
at all. Here's the tattoo you need to get.
Yeah, here's the tattoo. Sorry about the last one. We used to fake that all the time.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vidor Locksmith Show, where we are unlocking the secrets to success in the oil and gas industry, one interview and presentation at a time. I am so happy that everybody is here with us today. Sorry, we had a little bit of a technical difficulty getting started on time, but I'm so happy everybody is here. This is going to be a great show. Everybody knows when Fred comes on the show, it's going to be tons and tons of knowledge. So if you have not already, get your pen and paper ready to be able to start taking notes. And I do recommend, instead of writing out fully what's taking place as far as on the show, the notes and stuff like that, just write down the time that it occurs during the show. So if we're 13 minutes in, obviously Fred will say something amazing, not myself, but Fred will. Just write down 13 minutes, and that way you can always go back and be able to watch later. All right, we've got Ryan, who's watching from South Dakota. Ryan, thanks for being here. We've got a LinkedIn user from Qatar. Another LinkedIn user from the British Isles. Hey, guys, be sure to let us know where you guys are watching from. I've only gotten 4 comments so far. That's not like you guys normally. That's it. But Oscar, thanks for being here. Oscar's always sharing and letting people know about the show, and I really, really, really do appreciate that. Peter Aird, the Kingdom of Fife, Scotland. Okay. Peter's been on the show before. If you guys haven't seen it, be sure to go back and check that one out. That one's solely on YouTube because that day we had some problems with LinkedIn. We've gotten it fixed since then. But that interview is solely on YouTube. So if you want to go see the episode that I did with Peter, be sure to go over there and check it out. We've got Kurt watching from Calgary. We've got some, just everything's running by. Joe from Katy, Texas, Pakistan. Oh, wow, these are really coming in fast now. I can't even. Ricardo, as always, watching in to see the show. Wow. It's like every time I go to click on one, like the list moves up, and so I always miss it. And so I don't know which one's coming up until it's actually on the screen. From Lafayette, Louisiana, in the Permian today. He's out on a rig. Appreciate it, sir. From Tunisia. Rida? I think that's right. Bogey and the guys over at Dixon Directional. Bogey, thanks for being here this morning. Bill Helm from Belleville, Texas. All right, you guys are awesome. Hello, gents from offshore in Brazil. Wow, I want to go offshore Brazil so bad. I really, really, really do. I really wish that's like on my bucket list of places to be able to go work is anywhere in South America. So Neil Bergstrom tuning in today. He was part of the ISC WSA meetings the other day. He was putting in some great comments. Love that he's here to be able to watch this one. Zane Foster from San Angelo. That's where my brother went to college. So thank you for being here. Lenora and some of the NOV team watching. Say hello from Houston. Thank you for being here. Alistair from OKC. Thank you, sir. This is the best one. William Watson from Perth, Australia. It's where I started my career. Actually, yesterday, I don't know if you guys saw the post, but I made a post that said I accepted a new job offer 13 years ago yesterday. I was sent my offer letter from Schlumberger. Obviously accepted, and then was asked to leave at one point in time. So, yeah, neither here nor there. Hey, guys, do me a favor. If you like this episode with Fred, if you like any of the episodes in the past that we've had with Fred on, do me a favor and tag one of your friends in the comment section. Tag a friend in the comment section. Let them know. Share this with somebody else out there. If you've got a group, an organization that you're working with and you want to be able to get them on board with the limiter redesign, if it's a vendor, if it's a client, whoever it is, share it with them. Just tag anybody or whatever in the comment section, or like I said, share it. It means a lot to me and to everybody else out there that finally gets the opportunity to be able to hear this. So but I would extremely appreciate it. I'm trying to think. We've also got Robert Rapp from Tomball, LinkedIn user from Lagos, Nigeria. I wish the LinkedIn thing wouldn't just say LinkedIn user. We actually knew who it was. So I know today we're going to be getting a lot of questions. So guys, do me a quick favor. Try to keep the questions as far as like the wording of it short, so I don't have to read like a full paragraph. I'm a slow reader. That I don't have a problem admitting to that, but I'm a slow reader. And if you put like in Spanish style, you put the questions beforehand, so I don't have to read through the whole thing and just go, oh, that was just a comment. So if you do have a question for Fred, let me know that. So we also got LinkedIn user from Geneva. Wow. Celeste Schaefer tuning in from Houston over there with the neighbors team. Celeste, thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Let's see here. I do know this. We do have a lot of people from Exxon, EOG, Chevron, and Shell that are watching that are not commenting in the comment section, but I know that they're here because they all signed up to watch. So, next we need to do the new part of the show, which is the Minute with Fahim. Fahim is an amazing person who's doing some artificial intelligence and data analysis, data scientist stuff with me. He's helping me out tremendously, but I know that I'm not going to be able to keep him forever. So if this is somebody that you're looking for, a part of your team, please reach out to Fahim, connect with him on LinkedIn, see some of the stuff that he's putting out there, and take a strong consideration if you are hiring for that position to be able to bring him onto your team. I wish I could keep him forever, but can't. Haha, Dustin C. added. I knew people from Shell were watching. Thanks for being here, man. All right, so let's do this. Where's the little button? Y'all ready for this? Here we go. Take it away, sir.
Hey, okay, thanks, David. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. So today I want to talk to you guys about databases and specifically Postgres. So chances are, if you've worked with tabular data, you've probably heard of SQL, and Postgres is just like a flavor of SQL that we use. So I won't get too much into that, but what I want to talk today is about upgrading your Postgres, right? So, just like other software, Postgres also has like versions and like software updates and stuff. I think currently we're running 13. That's the latest one. But the thing is, when you want to upgrade your Postgres cluster to the newest version, how this was usually done in the past was there were some native built-in functions to do it. But the thing is, it wasn't possible to do this with zero downtime, right? So you can imagine if you have a database that's connected to a live application, or there's live data streaming in, you don't want downtime, right? You don't even want like 5 minutes of it to be off while you're upgrading. So how people usually used to do this before in the past was by using like third-party applications. Like, think Bocardo is one of them. There's Sloany. So you'd have to use those complicated applications, do some other stuff, and then get your upgrades, right? But now I read about this amazing feature that Postgres has recently put out, which is called a logical replication. And this is basically a built-in function that in Postgres now that you can use to upgrade your system from, let's say, 12 to 13 or even from 11 to 12 with zero downtime. So that's big, right? Zero downtime being done natively. So I mean, I didn't know about this method before. I just read about it. So I just want to share with y'all. I'll share the article that has in great detail how to do this upgrade procedure with the new method. And, you know, if you use Postgres, if you know anyone who uses Postgres, maybe you can relay the information to them. Yeah, that's all I got for this week.
All right. Thanks, Fahim. I do appreciate it. And that was Mirror Minute with Fahim. All right. We got to work on that little transition thing. It's supposed to stay up there the whole time and have the countdown. But for some reason, the software we're using, like the transparent background didn't come through. So I don't know. All right, guys, we're about to get started with the show here. Couple of updates. One thing is please sign up for the email list. I'm going to be a lot more diligent about that. Number two, also looking for companies that want to be part of the How It's Done series. If you guys have not watched the How It's Done series, please check it out over on YouTube, or if you can find them somewhere on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's not the best place for video content, but you can still find it. That's the first place I post everything, and then it follows up on YouTube. So if you can, go check it out on YouTube. If you're a company that wants to be a part of that, reach out to me. Let me know. We started filming Monday this week, actually down in Mexico. I wasn't there, but the videographer, Mom, was the one who did it. So that first episode's been filmed. We've already got the second one filmed as well. So we're looking forward to being able to fill out some more companies. So if it's something that you're interested in, reach out, let me know. And finally, please, you guys, like, follow the show, share, put the comments in, do all the things. We're about to get started. This is Fred Dupriest. This is going to be one of the best episodes. And I think the frequency that we're doing this, Fred just is going to start coming on every 6 months, as long as Fred's okay with it. He seems to be. So I think he likes talking to you guys and educating everybody out there. So quick commercial break. And right after this, we'll be back with Fred. All right, there we go. And Fred, thank you for coming on the show today, sir.
Good morning. I appreciate being here. Really appreciate the opportunity, David.
Other than myself, you've been on the show the most.
Well, like you say, I enjoy this. It's a great opportunity to share a little bit of practices and, particularly things related to limiter redesign.
So as far as the limiter redesign, I know that you're going to get into that, but what's a high level like elevator pitch for limiter redesign for anybody out there that's just now being introduced to it?
The principle is just so common, and we think we do it all the time. You improve something until something limits you from improving it, and then you address the thing that's limiting you, and that lets you improve it some more. Well, what we tend to do is look at things that are limiting us, and if they still seem normal, we don't do anything about them. We just don't. So I'm at a motor differential. I can't put any more weight on bit, and I'll drill with that same motor for a long time. Or I've got an auger, that's plugs at 100 feet per hour on an offshore rig, and so I drill 100 feet per hour, and I don't change the auger. And the day I do, I'm drilling 300 feet per hour. The things that feel normal are really what we end up doing most of our work on and getting most of the gain from. And of course, weight on bit is, we all work with what we feel is a normal weight on bit. And it particularly lets us see that it's okay to put more weight and weight on bit, that's what drills. So it's what limits me, redesigning it till something else does and redesigning that. Now, the other key part of it is physics-based. If I think something's normal, then I also have all kinds of ideas around it being just normal. That's the way it should be. unless you give me something I don't already know, it's still going to seem like the right thing to do. Only if you give me something that I don't already know will I start to think, well, yeah, that's not normal. Actually, that's limited. And so it was very important to compile, and I really credit ExxonMobil for this, for years of compiling physics, and for every physics, there was okay, if that's the way that works, what does a driller see to decide? And then what does the engineer redesign? Okay, what's the limiter? What are the physics? What can driller see to decide? What can engineer redesign? And, today I teach about, have been teaching about 134 practices. A large portion.
I think that means we need to do 134 episodes with you.
No, some are pretty simple, but wouldn't take that many. But that's sort of the basics of it all. And I'll go through in this presentation a good deal more of the texture of that.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and bring up your presentation. Like I said before, guys, if you are enjoying this, please like, comment, share, subscribe, do all of the normal social media things that people always ask you to do. And, of course, if I don't ask, you're not going to do it. And then we'll go ahead and bring up the presentation. If you guys do have any questions, try to keep them as short as you can so that we can get them up on the screen and I can find them. And then at any point in time that we get, a handful of questions or whatever, or Fred gets a stopping point, we'll go ahead and we'll start firing off a handful of the questions. Take it away, Fred.
Okay, David, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. We've got applying limiter redesign in the real world Delaware example up on the screen.
And do your guests have a picture of me, or is it
yes,
just
sir?
Okay, yes, well, I'll behave then. So, what we thought we'd do is we had a project to implement physics-based limiter redesign workflow programmatically at Noble Energy. And in the end, we wrote a paper. It's published 199-599. And the paper was really about trying to figure the Brushy Canyon damage of the bits out. But in reality, you really have to manage everything you do all the way to the Brushy Canyon. And of course, the objective is to go to TD. So you have to manage everything you do after the Brushy Canyon. So it's really the entire protective hull that you get involved in. And the limiters throughout that are very different. When we kind of looked at it, we said, we really have to do broad training and not just research on one thing, because a bit itself is probably not the answer. It's really how we work in so many different ways, and how I manage Whirl from the very beginning to the very end is going to determine whether I get a 1-bit run. The 1-bit run was the objective in a 12 1/4 hole, which hadn't been done. 9 7/8, sometimes, but not a 12 1/4. So Noble said, we're going to do a programmatic initiative, meaning we're going to teach all rigs, all crews, all engineers, all management. We're going to engage in trying to change ourselves into a physics-based as opposed to empirically driven all the time. We're going to watch every foot, analyze it, figure out what's going on, and make decisions foot by foot based on deterministic understanding of what's going on, not get a red bit, drill 5 wells, and see if the red bit worked better than the blue bit. It's a very different approach. So we did that, and what I want to do is use that as a little bit of the background here. I'll use data from that well and the discussion points, and in the end, I want to leave you with actual hard recommendations for things you should do in the Delaware Basin, particularly this kind of a southern central region. The north gets a little bit different, but I want to leave you with specific things, but at the same time, I want to use this as an example of walking you through how you go about sort of setting up and implementing a change in your organization like this. Now, I've worked with a large number of companies in a similar program process, and Dr. Sam Nornert and I have been doing applied drilling research, and that's what we call this kind of process where we come in and work with a company for a few months. So I'll be speaking really more from experience in other projects, not just this, as well. So the challenge in the Delaware Basin is pretty much the Brushy and the Avalon regions. Above that, you know, you have dysfunction and you have issues, and if you manage it all well, you drill a lot faster. But the one bit run is really about avoiding damage, not wear, but what we would call damage in one of these two intervals here. So that started out as our focal point, and yet, as I said, we really had to implement an entire organizational kind of training and change to try to address that. But this was the prize when we started out, these hard streaks and the things that happen around them. So I'll be talking about the physics of these hard streaks some, because I think you need to know that to understand some of our conclusions. So this is kind of an outline of subjects I'll go through, some of the key discussion points that we need to talk about in order to sort of put a bow around this. So I start with the same slide, and I know you guys get tired of this, but it really is key to understanding what we're doing. Physics-based limiter redesign is really wrapped around how bits really work. And the way a bit works is if you apply a weight on bit, the cutting structure indents, and then as you rotate, you remove the rock at that indentation depth. So weight on bit causes indentation. More weight on bit causes more indentation. That's why you drill faster. And then rotary speed, also, increases how much you remove per minute. At low weight on bit, we have some inefficiency, and I won't go into that, but we eventually get to a point where we actually do get a linear response between the weight changes and the ROP. So if I double my weight on bit, the ROP goes up proportionately. And that straight line is saying to me, okay, I'm efficient. That's what an efficient bit does. So if I have a straight line response, I have an efficient bit. We know at some point, keep raising weight on bit sometimes, and we don't get that response. That is not an efficient bit. So we know all the reasons for inefficiency. We've done lots of research, built practices. How does it work? What are the physics? What can driller C do? So what can engineer redesign? And we teach all that. And that's what every company, especially operators and general service providers, probably need to be compiling, in some kind of a very concerted program, an organized body of this, so they can teach an organized recognition and response. The bit should be doing this, which is beautiful. And we say, well, then to drill faster, you need more weight on bit. I need to change the weight on bit at which that dysfunction starts. Now, this is kind of shapes that are classic for bit balling. And what happens with bit balling, if you increase your hydraulic horsepower per square inch, you're still going to ball. But you might not do it until a much higher weight on bit and a much higher ROP. I had a case where we were balling at 120 feet an hour, changed that bit HSI, and we didn't ball to 500 feet an hour. So that is that idea of not fixing what's broken, but redesigning what limits me is a different question. An example I use is, if you ask your wife, what's wrong with our marriage, she might say no, but you say, what limits it from being better? And she'd say, well, let me get my spreadsheet. So that's a different mindset. Don't focus on what's broken. Don't think of it as broken. Just say, I'm limited by, and dispassionately and non-politically record it, work on it, learn about it, go find some physics if you don't understand bit balling, and you're off to the races. Well, as we do this, we can have all kinds of things that limit us, and everyone has its own physics, some things the driller can see to decide to do a little better right now, and some things the engineer can redesign. The non-bit limiters, if you're offshore control, probably 80% of your footage, and the dysfunctions are a little bit less important to you. If you're in the Delaware Basin, you have some level of dysfunction in almost every foot, but your actual limiter, they don't necessarily limit your weight on bit. They probably only limit your weight on bit in, I don't know, maybe 20% of footage. So the non-bit limiters, like I'm out of motor differential, I can't raise more weight on bit, should be what we really are focused on the most. And yet, those are things we think are normal. Well, I'm out of motor differential. What do you want me to do out here? And well, I don't want you to run more weight on bit if you're already out of motor differential. You get more torque and you'll exceed your motor differential. So we really need to get our head around becoming an organization that's continually redesigning the normal. Now, our management processes won't even focus on that. If something's not broken, the boss is not even going to want to know about it. So this is kind of a radically different thing to get people to go out and do this, just consistently and relentlessly is a different way of working. And that's where you start to see the need for a real programmatic initiative by the whole organization. And everybody has to kind of be part of inventing that, if you will, as it turns out. Somebody needs to pull the science and the practices and the physics into a pile, but you need to work with the entire organization because you're asking everybody to go to work every day and change how they work. And that's tough. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So this is the heart of limiter redesign. If I were in production and we've extended this to other departments, I still need to find that magic question. What limits me from increasing the drawdown at the bottom of the well? Because I get linear production increases with that. And then from that, I just start increasing drawdown. And then I say, well, now I'm limited by this with tubing stuff. Now I'm limited by this with formation cleft. Now I'm limited by this, the screen cleft. And you just keep engineering each thing as you go, but you get about the same result. You pretty profound and significant results because, again, I'm sitting there for years saying, don't pull more than 1,000 pounds of drawdown on the screen in the Gulf of Mexico. And I just buy in and say that's normal. And so it's kind of a general philosophical approach that tends to make a lot of money, but not an easy one to actually implement in an organization. Remember that if you have the bit off bottom, that's the first thing you've got to prioritize. So the model kind of accommodates reaming, circulating, and tripping. And each of those has, what are you reaming? It has its physics, what caused that, and blah, 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 and what can the driller see decide, and what can the engineer redesign. They're no different. They should be part of your pile of redesign practices for all of these limiters that you run into. The beauty of this is I can't be limited any foot of hole by more than one. So that lets my organization and my well, my rig, my drill pipe, my hydraulic system, my rock focus on what actually makes me money, whereas a researcher or a vendor or whatever has to be trying to generally make money. And it turns out that there's a huge difference in the outcome in terms of performance if you can focus on every foot. So I hope I don't lose anybody with all this philosophy before we talk some Delaware, but it's really important that your organization is not used to redesigning what's normal. And what we're really describing is a continuous improvement process, though I don't call it that because there's so much hard feelings around that. But it is a plan, do, analyze cycle like all continuous improvement processes. So, you're going to plan to do something, you're going to do it, and you're going to analyze what happened, and you're going to plan the next one. What tends to happen here is that we plan, we do it, we learn a few things, and we make a change. One well, two wells, and now that becomes the new normal. There's so many things that just have become normal now. And that's where we are, and that's where we stay. And if you look at learning curves in different fields, you'll see anywhere from you'll see about a 10% improvement. In a simple well, we don't have many of those. You'll see about a 30% improvement in a complex well before you hit that plateau. And that's where we have a lot of that out there. And yet there could be a 50 or 60% improvement if you would attack what's normal. So there's money to be made here. The question is, how do you get your organization to actually go out and identify what limits them and just relentlessly, with a lot of attitude, go after that for the next well, and then go after the next thing for the next well. Nobody's staffed to do that. And if it becomes my performance appraiser to do that, that's pretty scary. It's not scary to say drill a well and have no trouble, because I just keep doing what I've been doing. It drilled a well and had no trouble. So there's a lot of organizational dynamic here, and you're going to need what I call mechanical workflow devices to make this circle go round and round and round. And by mechanics, I mean procedures that someone has to follow that just naturally gets them to redesign something. Good example would be the simple step test out while I'm drilling.
raise weight on bit and steps and identify what limits you, and then document it on the daily report. You put that on the daily report, and in the morning meeting, everybody says, okay, we're limited by, what are we going to do about it? And the engineer, at the table is going to say, oh, nothing. Right? Really? No, I don't think so. So that's a mechanical device. Stating what limited me after a step test is a mechanical, what I call a mechanical workflow device, because it's kind of almost physical. It's going to make something happen. So at every stage of the plan, do, analyze cycle in your company, your team needs to sit down and say, in our company, what keeps us from redesigning, changing? And you got two things: how people work at the rig, and secondly, how we engineer change. Okay. So in your company, and I say that because we all have different business models. Some people have lots of engineering, some people don't. Some people have engineers at the rig site, and some people don't. And so they move the responsibilities around differently. Some of the things that you often find are really important is, first, 10 times more important than anything else on the list, you've got to pile up that knowledge and you've got to teach everybody in the team. And I don't mean the engineer. I mean the driller on the brake handle, and especially the DD who doesn't even work for you. Because they're the ones who are sitting out there needing to identify, making decisions, and we can't do that for them remotely. What limits you on a rig always is complicated by collateral things going on. You may think, oh, that's spitballing, let's do this. Well, but there's a reason for not doing that the rig knows about and you don't know about. Also, there's ownership and there's a human dynamic there that the way we are in drilling, if the rig is not in charge of performance, you're not going to get performance. And I think most of you have been around for a while know that. So now I'm going to make a formal process. You better make the rig at the heart of that formal process. So the job of the rig is to run step tests, do things, and identify limiters, and tell the engineer what to do. Tell the engineer our limiter is, now you go do something about it. The rig has to drive this process, or it's, and I've seen engineers have to drive it because we had issues on a rig, couldn't keep the knowledge there or whatever. But in the perfect world, you really want to train your rig crews to a level that they understand all the dysfunctions. They understand what does it really mean when you say a motor is out of differential. So it's out of torque, right? So, or I'm torque limited, my drill pipe is limited, so it doesn't make any difference to get a new motor because I'm out of torque. Well, go get a faster motor, because bit speed does not increase torque. So I could go from a 0.31 to a 0.4 motor, drill 30% faster with the same amount of torque. So those kinds of physics people don't understand necessarily. The team that, if you pile up all this knowledge, the more you manage to get on the rig site, the better you're going to do. If you can't do that for whatever reason, then this process will just look differently. You've got to get your engineers more tied in. You've got to get vendors access to digital data. You've got to find a way to get that knowledge in your decision-making process, which might be a different way. Some other important things are that what you're going to develop is what I call a geologic roadmap for each interval. Our dysfunctions kind of change sometimes with lithology if they're going to change. So we tend to break the well down into different lithologies, and within each lithological group, we're going to identify the limiter there from step tests. And we're going to keep running those every well, by the way. You don't do them and figure this out and then quit running the step test. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to identify the change, and that roadmap helps us manage not only the practices we've learned in the past, but what we're going to do differently, or what we're studying, working on the vendors or whatever. We just kind of try to document all of that per formation in a roadmap, and I'll show you one of those. In your training, I worked with a lot of companies. If you have a manager, anybody who makes decisions relative to drilling, that might be a drilling manager, it might be a VP. If they're going to make drilling decisions, they have to go to training. And if they won't go to training, my advice is don't even start this stuff. I can tell you lots of stories about that, but what you're doing, if you start all of this and you create this momentum in your organization, and your manager doesn't go to training, they can be the most well-intended person in the world. But the first time you have a bit failure and you know the physics, what needs to be done and all that, your manager doesn't, then you're going to get called cowboy. You're going to get, it's just, they're not going to understand what you're doing. And unless they understand, for example, that higher weight on bit does not wear the bit fascia. Sorry, it just doesn't. But how many people know that? So these are really, really important things that you're going to have a real hard time implementing as a team if your management, who is anywhere close to making decisions about your operation, doesn't sit in that room, go to the same training, or be on the same Zoom call. And I really can't stress that enough. Step test, the crew identifies the limiters, not the office, identify risk of change. Really, really important. If you're an engineer and you want to change something, you ask the person doing the work, you say, here's what I'm trying to change. How do you feel about that? Are there any risks that scare you? If they give you a risk, you may think it's not a risk. Well, that's not your choice. They gave you a risk. They're running the brake handle. So you either teach them that it's not a risk, not just tell them not to worry about it. Teach them some physics and you get them data, you do whatever you have to until they say, I'm okay with that. If you violate that and you push it down their throat, you're going to find the next thing harder and the next thing completely uncooperative. They're probably right and you're probably wrong, because it's all these collateral things that get us in trouble, and they know those and you don't, sitting way on the other side of the world in your little data center. So this relationship around real-time risk management is really just about honestly asking people what they're afraid of and doing something about it. And don't go ask them to do the operation differently until they agree with you that that seems like a good deal. And that is, folks, is a lot of work, but it's important. Okay. So these are just some examples. Your company may be different because your business model, staffing, everything is different. Wells you drill. But the key is that your organization needs to understand you're committing to continuous improvement, continuous redesign, and that the cycle has to change. What happens with every single company that I've ever worked with is they go out and they get a 30% gain. I've never seen less. When they understand a few simple things like higher weight on bit doesn't wear the bit. And I've seen 50% in a matter of a month. So the problem is not getting that gain, it's that you then quit because it becomes a new normal. It is really hard, and yet you're sitting there limited and can do much more. And the key to getting more, and somewhat the key to even keeping what you got, is to make this circle go round. Okay, I need to move up. I'm moving pretty slow here, so I need to get this done pretty quickly, but this is really critical. When you ask somebody to change, there's some steps. You can go online and read about change models. How do you get your organization? How do you get people to change? So there are some steps that I think are critical. Common, you might choose other steps, but your question for yourself is, what is limiting that driller from changing weight on bit? What is limiting that DD from changing weight on bit? And kind of think in the philosophical range. They may not understand the physics. Well, then you had to address that. You have to teach. You may not know the physics, and you have to develop that. There's that pile of practices. It's most always that they perceive a risk that you don't. So your actual workflow, mechanical workflow, should always be, for any change, a field trial, even a new bit. It should be, what risk do you feel is out there? And as I said earlier, there's nothing more important than actually dealing with that. And deal with everybody. Does your manager see a risk and they're just, playing possum in the corner until something goes wrong? Achieve clear management support, and I don't mean a signature on a paper. I mean, make sure that management is particularly bought in that we're going to redesign, we're going to change. Our objective is change, not reliable, consistent delivery of the budget we promised, because that means no change, right? But MBO, management by objectives, it measures them, it rewards them, it punishes them on did they deliver what they said they would at the cost they said they would last year. So management support is not necessarily a very easy thing to get because corporate management doesn't tend to reward them for significant improvement. And that's just an MBO problem. And all corporations, yours, mine, we all have MBO structures. So we kind of need limiter redesign to operate with that, but slightly outside that. And it takes a management to understand that in order to manage a kind of a little cycle inside their organization of continuous improvement. Be specific in your training if you want to change something. You know, I want you to run 20,000 pounds more weight on bit, and measure that what you thought you were changing really did change. I want 20,000 pounds weight on bit because we have a lot of whirl at 20, just at 20, and at 40, I think it'll go down dramatically. Well, don't just prove that you drill faster. Prove that whirl went down, and that's what you do with MSE. Prove that your physics is right, not that you drill faster. And the reason is that I can play games with ROP all day long, and y'all know that. You know, we're trying a new bit. Well, okay, run a little bit more weight on bit. It's going to drill faster. So understand what the physical thing is that you're trying to prove, and make sure that you measure things that prove that. So I've got 6 things, and I teach these same 6 things to everybody. You could be a phone call for 15 minutes if it's simple that you go through all 6. It could take 2 years to work your way through that for some kinds of changes. But whether you like the 6 or you have a favorite 5 or whatever, what really limits the person who has to do the work from changing? And figure out what that is, and then have a plan for each of those items. So step tests are the heart of everything. So we go out in the Brushy Canyon or the Delaware Basin. You come out of surface casing shoe and you're going to do step tests. These actually aren't from there, but that's just, you just raise your weight on bit and raise your weight on bit, raise your weight on bit. Mechanical specific energy tells us if we're to the right of the straight line. If MSC goes down like it does right here, every time I raise weight on bit, MSC goes down. That's the energy per volume of rock. That means I'm using less energy per volume of rock. I'm getting more efficient. Well, as you raise weight on bit, the only dysfunction that gets better is whirl. See how it's getting closer to the line? If I had any of these other dysfunctions, I would get further from the line. So diagnostically, I know that whirl is dominating. I know that if I raise weight on bit, I will have disproportionately higher gains in ROP, not just linear. And I know from other experience, I would say whirl accounts for about 80% of all the bit wear in the world. We don't wear our bits, we bang our bits with whirl. We damage our bits. And so step tests, you know, they tell us, along with other training that you did, I've got to have more than MSC to figure out stick slip. I got to understand torque cycling and be able to diagnose it and all that. So each of the different dysfunctions we have has a different set of knowledge around it. But the step test is how we find that we have a problem. And so that's why it's critical that we do these things usually every 400 or 500 feet. If you have a lot of experience and long intervals and you're just not learning anything new, and someone's working on the limiter already and you already know what you're working on, then maybe you don't do it that often. But every 4 or 5 stands is not a bad idea. We also want step test in RPM because there are rotary speeds that you turn your string that will be resonant and you don't want to turn them. So drill that you don't have to do often because resonance is a attribute of your BHA basically. So you drill out, get all that outside of your casing shoe, do RPM step test, find the quietest MSC and try to operate there, or the lowest MSC, or certainly avoid RPM where the MSC rose. Of course, today, many of you will have downhole tools that actually are reporting things up, but you can use MSC if you don't have those tools. People who have downhole tools, and this makes you a little crazy, won't look at them. Then they won't do an RPM step test. And procedures come out and say turn 70 RPM, and that's what they do. But if you have a downhole tool, go through this process and make sure you're operating in a quiet place. Whirl doesn't just wear your bit. It is the number one cause of motor failures. If you've seen videos, full-scale videos of Whirl, it is stunningly violent for your motor. Okay, so I'm going to take one of these physics things and demonstrate how we change the organization when we teach it over physics. I've said high weight on bit in itself doesn't wear the bit faster. The reason is that if I apply weight on bit, it indents until the force per area equals rock strength. So I got a 5,000 pound rock. If this is a small area and my force per area exceeds 5,000, the rock breaks and gets out of the way. But that gives me more area. So it will sink and dent until the force per area is 5,000 pounds on the rock, because the rock can resist 5,000. And these two surfaces sit here at equilibrium between the load per area and the rock strength per area. I'm simplifying things, but that's basically what determines our indentation depth or our depth of cut. When force per area. Well, if I raise weight on bit, what happens is that I indent further to grow more area before I get that same balance point. 5,000 per area force, 5,000 pound rock. And that's why we get a linear increase in weight on bit if the bit's efficient. But note the force per area on the cutter, whether I have 20,000 pounds weight on bit or 40,000 pounds weight on bit, the force per area on an individual cutter can't be greater than rock strength. It's still 5,000. So I'm not changing the force per area on my cutter, and my diamond is, it's good for 1 million plus. So our rock doesn't actually wear our bit anymore. This is an old picture. I think it's probably from an early 90s PDC bit. It's an old one. If we had actual wear, and you would have faster wear out here because it slides further out here than it does inside, this would be what you would get. And I have never seen a bit like that. What we have in our bits is damage from dysfunctions. So we don't really wear bits. So what that means is, and we don't get more force per area with higher weight on bit. The way a bit does wear, if it does, is from the sliding distance of this edge right here at the bottom. So if I run higher weight on bit, what happens is I travel at a higher depth of cut, 3 times the weight on bit, 3 times the ROP, but I'm traveling at a higher depth of cut. So to drill any 100 feet, I slide 1/3 the distance an individual cutter does. If I run a lightweight on bit, I'm going to have to slide it much, much further to make the same footage. So in reality, very high weight on bit reduces wear, normal frictional wear. Now, who knows that? Now, imagine that your team now knows that, the ones who are afraid of just wear. It changes everything. It changes your conversation. Now you're focused on dysfunction. Now you can say, I raise weight on bit in step tests until I see dysfunction. And you teach them all the different looks of dysfunction. This one right here is Whirl. You teach them these looks of dysfunction, and now they know, as long as I raise weight on bit and MSE is okay, I can keep raising weight on bit and nothing bad's going to happen. And that's how you get to 65, 70,000 pounds. And that's what you should be running in a lot of your Delaware protective hulls on a 12 1/4 bit. Because when you do MSE step test, you're not going to see the MSE come off the line, and you're making your bit wear less and less and less the higher the weight on bit per foot drill that you use it. So let's go back and remember these things here. You've been running 35,000 pounds weight on bit, and I want you to run 65,000 pounds. I want you to step test all the way to 65,000 pounds. Okay. The limiter is that the bit vendor said run 40,000. That's my limiter, actually. I don't know why. but I'm not going to exceed what the bit salesman said. I explained all this physics to you though now, and now you're not afraid of it. And I've taught you how to identify dysfunction. You had concerns about the risks that you're aware, but I taught you how to identify dysfunction as you run a step test using MSC and other data. Now you're less concerned about the risk. You're still aware, and at some point I'm going to say, well, then as we do the step, what can we watch? I work with you to try to make it a real-time decision and respect your concerns. But I've addressed the risk by just simply explaining the physics, and I can probably provide you offset well data, and I'll show you some more data in a minute that will kind of blow this away. I'm not going to tell you around 65,000 pounds without my, if we've been running, 35 or 40 without the drilling manager knowing that we're going to do these tests and the drilling manager understanding the same physics. I'm going to give you a step-by-step procedure for raising weight on bit. It's going to say, here's how you keep your RPM constant while you do this. Here's how you read the MSE. Something like a step test you've been doing a long time, not so much. But if you've never done step tests before, it turns out the first time you try to implement step testing into your rig, you're going to find all kinds of mechanical issues in trying to maintain stuff, depending on your control system and all that. And finally, we're not going to measure ROP in the end anyway. We know we drill faster with higher ROP. What we're going to do is watch MSC for indications of accelerated wear over a long distance. Secondly, we're going to take pictures of the bit when it comes out of the hole, and it's going to be green. Those are metrics that say that what I thought would happen really did happen. Okay, so that's an example of one thing I might introduce, but you're going to introduce something different for every dysfunction you find, and maybe multiple things. And you need to respect that process, that 6-step process, and especially respect the concern of the person at the brake handle. Teach them until they're not concerned, or do trials or do something. So we're going to capture our learnings from all these step tests into this geologic roadmap. So I know you guys can't read this, and I barely can. But in the Solido, that's an interval of salts and thick anhydrites that come and go. And what we learned from drilling this, analyzing MSC, doing step tests, was that the salts, you can run 90,000 pounds weight on bit. I mean, nothing happens if your bit could handle it. And by the way, ask for the structural limit of the bit, not the operating recommendation. And you'll find 12¼ structural limits are all in excess of 70,000 pounds, and go there. So unless something limits you, like motor differential usually. So salts, nothing happens in salt, but we actually have a peculiar phenomena of bit balling in the anhydrites. And what I need for that then, I know my science, I got the practices, I need bit HSI. And I'm going to crank up my bit HSI until, and see if I can move that founder point with future step tests. And that's that's my metric. Did I move the founder point for balling? Not did I drill faster, because there's just too much going on with that. Balling and anhydrites is very little published on it, and I've seen it in 3 different places now, so I'm getting comfortable with that. And I've seen it respond to increased HSI. Okay, so what risk do you have? Oh, we'll wash the hole out. Well, then you have to teach people that hydraulics don't wash the hole out. And there's another long story there. The salts are going to erode out from just dissolving, of course, but I'm wasting pump energy with all this pressure. Well, you may be right, So do your step test and make sure that HSI is actually getting you something. And if it's not, back down. Maybe you something else becomes a limiter before your HSI of 7 or 8, is needed. HSI of 7 or 8, wow, that'll erode my bit. Well, are you renting bits or are you buying bits? You really have to look at your own situation about those deals. A 7 or 8 isn't going to make your cutters fall out, but it's going to erode the bit to the point that you probably are going to buy it. So that's an example of going through interval by interval. This is the only balling in West Texas. You see it both in the Midland, this phenomena both in the Midland and the Delaware Basins and the anhydrites. And then we're kind of done with balling, and we're mostly on to Whirl. So I've got balling here. So this is actually a takeaway for you guys at work area. Do some work with HSI in the Salito. It's down to, in this area, about 6,200 feet. From there all the way through the Cherry Canyon, if you just keep raising your weight on bit, you won't see any dysfunction. Meaning you should be drilling this with the limit of your bit or motor differential, or something should be limiting you other than fear for the bit. Again, the higher the weight on bit, the greater the depth of cut, the less wear you'll have. You really should end up typically in about 65,000 pounds weight on bit. At that point, you're very likely to be motor differential or drill pipe makeup torque limited, or maybe top drive, but usually drill pipe makeup torque limited at some point. Now, your drill pipe makeup torque limited, we tend to be running motors that have way more torque than a drill pipe can handle. A lot of them do. Go to a different motor that has about the same torque limit as your drill pipe. You haven't given up any RP. You can still go to that weight on bit and that bit torque, and a faster motor. I'm going to get more ROP out of a faster motor as long as that other motor, my faster motor, will still deliver the actual bit torque that I'm actually drilling with. When I'm limited with drill pipe, then I'm going to get, if it's a 30% faster motor, I'm going to drill 30% faster. Motor speed is the game that we're not playing enough of in the Delaware. Now, I think that the Bakken is way into this, and they're running 1.0 motors and just tremendous speeds. Little different drilling conditions, but not if you understand it from a dysfunctional standpoint, really not. At least through most of the Cherry Canyon. Now, when you get to the lower part of the Cherry Canyon, we start to getting into some laminar interfacial severity, probably rare in this area of the Delaware. Most of that doesn't start till about the middle of the Brushy Canyon. So speed, there's not really a reason that I know of not to use more speed when I'm torque limited. But again, do your step test. Are you drill string torque limited? Or are you something else? If not, don't go get more speed. If you can keep putting more weight on bit, it'll keep drilling faster, and you're not limited on that. So every foot, every rig, your pipe, your well, your top drive, your hole size, you have to do this step testing and analysis with people who have been trained with this pile of information you put together to decide what the right answer is. And you can't look over the fence and say, well, that's what Joe's doing over there, or you don't want to. Most of the money that is made comes from just raising weight on bit in places where we discover we can, where the step testing and MSC says there's no problem with it. So when I tell you that, Wells programs actually gain 30%, the dirty little secret is that all we did was raise the weight on bit. But I don't want to make that sound too simple, because everyone has a reason not to, unless they have a process, an MSC, step testing, unless you can give them practices that let them know that they're doing it safely, raising it safe. Raising it safe. Then unless they have that process, then they have no choice but to take the bit vendor recommendation, because there's going to be a place down here called the Brushy Canyon where it's not safe. And if they don't know how to do step test and recognize that, then they have no choice but to fall back to the least common denominator. And that's going to be 30% slower anyway. Again, if you, not only is this not limited by any kind of dysfunction, but once you get through the Avalon, from there all the way to your casing point, kickoff point, you're not limited there either. That's what your step test will show you. So we're down to the Brushy Canyon and the Avalon, which were our problem children, and we know that. And so in this case, we didn't have the knowledge for what we needed to do. And so that's why A&M was involved with this as well. We had a research graduate working on that question is how do the physics of these damaging events really work? Well, let me come back to that, but I'm going to show you some other practices that are useful and some proof of some things. These are two MSE curves. One is the downhole MSE and the other is the total MSE. Total meaning I took my torque from the top drive. So the green curve has all of your drill string torque into the equation. It's total energy I'm using the whole rig to drill with per rock volume. The downhole MSE is right off the motor shaft, using differential across the motor torque factor and all that. And you can see the downhole MSE then is really closer to a true bit performance curve. And of course it would be lower. And the difference between these two is the drill string loss. What you see if you plot this and what your practice should be, you eyeball the downhole MSE and you draw a line through it. The bottom of that curve, it's going to wobble around due to bit whirl. Basically, episodes of bit whirl will make it rise, then it'll fall back to its baseline. Rock strengths don't really change as much as you think. Episodes of bit whirl are the reasons we see big changes in ROP, and they're physical, physics-based reasons. By 1 foot of rock is rarely more significantly stronger than the next. So really, this should be a fairly smooth and gradually increasing baseline over depth as rock slowly rises, rock strength. So anyway, just you don't have no rock strength, have no anything, just visually draw a line down the bottom of all this, call that your baseline. Whenever your MSE goes down and touches that, that is as efficient as your bit is ever going to get, suggesting you're on that straight line in that plot I showed you earlier, or close to it maybe. So that's my straight line, or that's my best performance I can possibly get. Now, what happens if the bit wears is that now my vertical load is spread over contact area and I don't get depth of cut. It'll indent still until the contact area, force per area equals rock strength. But there's so much area that it's not going to be very much indentation depth when that happens. So now we're over here. That should show up as a change. I should come off the baseline. If that has happened, I can never ever go back to the baseline because I can't get rid of all that contact area. So what you see here at the very end is that we had to pull this bit. And the technique is then to zoom in and find the relationship, find this ramp where MSE started to move away from the baseline, but chase it back and find the exact foot where MSE started moving away from the baseline. What this is saying is that you didn't have a bit of wear whatsoever. Nowhere, 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 none. This is a pristine green bit. And we've had lots of examples where we pulled bits and they were pristine green, hardly a scratch on them. But as soon as you come off that line, it's telling you something like this has happened. So once you find that 1 foot, you go back on your time scale where you can zoom into seconds or minutes, and you find the actual event that triggered this damage. And you just got really, really smart. You saw a large torque spike. You saw, something that you can mitigate with bit design. You saw an operational mistake. We just kind of overloaded it with too much weight on bit, temporarily not paying attention or something. You will find something there. And now you've got either an operational practice you can change or maybe a design practice you can change. You have something specific. So what we're doing with baseline MSE surveillance is first we're confirming that your rock does not wear your bit. And high weight on bit, this is 70,000 pounds right here. That didn't affect that bit at all. 60, 65,000 pounds, no effects whatsoever on that bit. So you can use the MSC baseline behavior to teach your team it's okay, it's okay, okay. See, now we've been doing this for 500 feet. There's not a twitch in that baseline. We're not moving. So that's one useful thing. But the other useful thing really is to move from having to guess at why a bit wore out. And most people will think this happened over thousands of feet. Once you have an event that triggers a ramp like this, the bit rarely lasts 200 feet. It's usually more like 50 feet before you pull it. This is particularly powerful in West Texas and the unconventionals with harder rock because we have more of these acute events at interfaces. We have higher whirl events related between the bit and the rock, acute events. If you're in the Gulf of Mexico, South Texas, places like that, the rock is smooth, uniform, and you don't really get these big events, meaning every bit actually should drill the bottom and pull green. But in hard rock, knowing where something happened lets you turn that plan to analyze cycle and move forward, because I can figure out what really happened and maybe make something different happen in the future. So the other practice that you need is going in your pile of knowledge is how to analyze bit failure. We call it root cause. This is whirl. This is interfacial severity. There's hinges there. What this is the stud got overloaded. This is impact from the outside wearing it down. And I could probably find better examples. That one's so worn you can't tell how it started. But this is a stud failure. Probably didn't drill 50 feet after this broke. Stud failure, not diamond failure. And it comes from those cutters right there over engaging and getting too much torque on them. So there's a couple of concepts, and from a research standpoint, what we tried to prove here was basically that there's a lot published about the nose being damaged when you go into hard formations. But how are we damaging the shoulder and not damaging the nose at all? And we knew things were happening around calcite streaks. So we went in and we said, okay, we get the nose thing. And Paul Pastusik wrote a really great paper on this last couple of years ago. Really focused on nose failure. The thought is that we're not doing it going in, we're doing it coming out. When our nose gets into soft rock, we lose the support here, and these cutters take all the weight. So all this bit weight is focused on a few cutters, so they indent way more than they should, and now that torque overloads them. Okay, so then what do? You got an idea. You get with experts, you get with bit vendors, you do modeling, you spend a year, you spend a lot of time or months or whatever it takes. You set up field trials to try to understand this. And you try different things that would confirm it, like depth of cut control out here, or how you manage your weight on bit, or you start into a process. In this case, the answers aren't just lying out there on the table for you. So that's what we did. And also be aware that on a bent motor, this side of your bit isn't even touching the hull. So when I say the shoulder loaded up, not only is, so this loses load because the rock is soft, it loses vertical support and all the vertical weight goes out here. Not only that, but because it's bent, you get even more on one side. How many times have you pulled a PDC with a blade broken or studs broken on a single blade, or maybe two blades on only one side of the motor or the bit, and you thought, how in the hell did that happen? Well, on a bent motor, you're only loading one side at a time if you're rotating the drill string. So, I mean, what would you do? What would you do then if you had this kind of understanding and or trying to test that theory? What would you do? Well, stop using a 2.3 motor for one thing. If you get it down to 1.5, and if you're in your lateral, it should be a 1.2 or 1. But certainly get it down to 1.5, because we know we can drill we can build 10 degrees per 100 if we are willing to stabilize our motor. So problems like this also have a bit design answer. Make the stud stronger. Well, do you have room in your blade? I mean, that's a real project with your bit vendor. But just make it stronger because you're not breaking the diamond. Right? So there's another idea. We also, did work to confirm that our transitions leaving calcite stringers are very short and going in are very long. One of the physical questions you asked in that previous picture is, how can I get so much load, on the side and not on the nose? Well, it takes a really sharp transition, so the nose can be in something really different than the shoulder. And lo and behold, it turned out that we've got that, and you can also see it in the torque response. The other thing that this kind of solved was the Brushy Canyon is known to be really damaging, but in this area we drilled hard sandstone streaks that are just as strong as these calcite stringers, and these don't really tend to do as much damage. And now what we understand is the transitions in and out of these sands are quite long, so the face of your bit's not really in a different rock strength. But the calcite exits are really sharp. And it's really the nature of how quick the transitions are that lets part of the bit face be loaded differently than another part. And so that's what's going on with the difference you see in the damage in the Brushy and the Avalon. It's something to look for if you see similar kinds of behaviors in other places. From there, to TD, from the base of the Avalon, MSC's low, uniform, hardly a bobble, no bit wear whatsoever. We continue to return to the baseline after little episodes of Whirl, and we should be running 65, 70,000 pounds. At this depth, we start to see weight on bit become limited by stick slip. In some rigs, especially 5-inch drill pipe, then the higher speed motor really starts to become seductive here, because it helps not solve stick slip. Let's not use those words. It elevates the weight on bit at which stick slip will occur if I can get a lot more bit speed, and it drills faster. So that's one thing to start considering. And this is a typical green bit that is pulled, at the base, at the casing point out there. If you get a bit in, any bit that goes in below the Avalon is probably going to pull green. Whether you run 45,000 pounds on it and drill slow, or you run 70,000 and drill really fast. So some of the results is, interval time was reduced by 28%. In the case of Noble, the rig site team engagement was amazing. And I think they really enjoyed the training that we opened with was 16 hours over 2 days, and they did not enjoy that necessarily. It's a trick to give that kind of training. You can teach one crew, right before they're going to tire, but you either have to separate and go a different week with the second crew, or the people that were just up all night long have to come in the hotel and go through class. So those are kinds of decisions you have to make about how you're going to teach. Getting people away from the rig in a room as a group, and always you got your DD, your mud engine, just everybody in the team that you can get in there, is 5 times more effective than trying to teach on the rig. You've got peer pressure. You've got the opportunity for disagreement to get sorted out. You've got the opportunity for a lot of agreement to happen, and that's just as important. So how you train is a big deal. Management must go to training, and it's best if you do it as an entire team with all the diverse people involved, and especially your vendors, because the role they play now. You're not going anywhere without them, especially your DD. Step test, the baseline MRC surveillance, the roadmap, all of these really prove to be critical elements of drilling the Delaware, and I'm sure it's true of most complicated geology that we have in unconventionals. I didn't talk a lot about the bit photo documentation, but that's critical in any operation anywhere in the world, to know what your bit looks like when you pull it, and if it isn't green, go back into that baseline MSE surveillance, find out where it stopped being green, and figure out what was going on. And that's part of what you do with that. Specifically in the Delaware, maximize the bit HSI through those anhydrides. If you're torque limited, look for a faster motor, as long as it will deliver the bit torque you were actually using. One thing you want to plot on your EDR is actual bit torque, not motor differential alone. That's fine. But take that motor differential, multiply it times your torque factor for that motor, and plot a curve that's bit torque in foot-pounds. Because what you're going to find, if you watch that for a few wells, you're going to get so damn smart. You're suddenly going to start realizing a lot of relationships are going to start making sense when you actually watch your bit torque. You got a 12.25 bit. You know, if you're getting 15,000 foot-pounds of bit torque, you're doing really well, and you're drilling fast, and you have a high weight on bit. Anytime you see 10,000 foot-pounds of bit torque, you should be saying, yeah, I know we can do better than that. So you actually start to think in terms of bit torque. When you see loss of bit torque, when you have the same weight on bit, you know, you got something's going on with your bit or your motor. It becomes a useful integral part for the DD of understanding motor differential, motor wear, bit wear. Try it. And most of your EDRs have that in the pick list now. So plot a bit torque curve and just watch it for a while and see if you don't start liking it. And then, you know, we should have very high weights on bit outside the Brushy Canyon, Avalon. We have got to get our motor bends down. If you're having trouble building 10 degrees under with the 1.5 motor, it's because you're slick. Just quit drilling slick, and that's the answer. I'm being pretty dogmatic about that. And if you can't build with the 1.5, though, there's a reason. Go figure out what's actually limiting the 1.5 from building 10, because geometrically it has to build 10. If it's not, then somehow on your slides and rotates on your rotates are whirling and you're cutting the side of the hole. There's something physical going on that is not letting it work. And it's so important to get that down to at least a 1.5, because the level of whirl you're enabling is so massively higher with a 2 degree or a 2.3 that it has all kinds of collateral effects on your operations. And it can't get there without stabilizers. Another alternative that we found as conclusion of the paper is that when you drill the Brushy Canyon, you're trying to avoid that shoulder overbiting. Some people try to limit weight on bit, but that ends up with episodes of real high whirl. It's better to limit ROP, because you know your EDR has an ROP set point. What you're really doing by limiting ROP is limiting the depth of cut at which the bit is traveling at. And so it's a little bit better if you have a fast response with your rig control system to have that holding things than weight on bit, constant weight on bit. It does a little bit better job of keeping the shoulder from overbiting. I think that's been it was experience for us, run constant ROP. And I've talked to other operators, I think, who feel the same way. You still want to be increasing it, you know, but now you're kind of looking for the magic depth of cut. Can I sustain a 0.13 or can I push it up to 0.15? The only way to figure that out is to empirically do it from well to well to well. Just try higher and higher depths of cut and see what enables your bit to survive. Stronger studs if you can. Let's see. I didn't really prepare to say much about the lateral, but I would just say that if you have full returns and normal flow rates, hole cleaning is not a problem if you have a gauge hole. You really should be pushing your weight on bit up and finding motor speeds, combinations of speeds, and that get you to 400 or 500 feet per hour in any unconventional. And that's not where the industry is in most areas. Interestingly, the Bakken is, and for some reason, the Midland Basin isn't, from what I've seen. The problem you have here is buckling. If I try to get to those ROPs by adding weight on bit and depth of cut, I end up buckling the pipe. Well, the answer for that is speed. So, and that's why you're seeing 1.0 motors in the Bakken, and you're seeing that deliver plenty of torque. But you're only seeing maybe 0.23s, 0.31s in the Delaware, and I think that's something that operators in the Delaware and the Midland basins really need to explore more. Get the bends down. You don't need that stirrability, and there's a huge collateral cost to higher bend motors. People don't seem to be aware of. So the key to drilling 4 or 5 feet in iron from a hole cleaning standpoint is drill a gauge hole. And the way I know that is I watch what's on the shaker. So I've done another talk here about cuttings monitoring, cavings monitoring. If you get your crew to watch for cavings and you don't have any cavings and they know what those look like, and you don't have any, you have a gauge hole. And so you should push your ROPs up however high you want to. It's really, really hard to pack off a gauge hole. If you do see cavings, now you're going to have to sit down and have an intelligent conversation, because it is transient hydraulic events around enlargements where cavings have come from that actually get us packed off. And you may very well see that 500 feet an hour is not safe. So if I see cavings, raise the mud weight, make it gauge, and now 500 safe. But if I can't raise my mud weight and I've got cavings, then you have to have a much more complicated conversation, I think. Do a little experimenting. Okay, wow, I just rambled on there, and I'm way over time here.
No worries, Fred. No worries at all. I do have a handful of questions if you are ready.
You bet.
All right, so here we go. Fred, can you please comment on the strategy to drill with constant ROP limit through hard stringers?
Well, I don't know if that question was posed before I answered it. I think I answered that just a second ago, but it's to maintain that constant depth of cut, because what's damaging us in the stringers is part of the weight, part of the bit face being the soft rot, where it just goes in, which moves all of your weight on bit out of to the part of the cutters that can't indent, so it loads up out there. Then they take a much bigger depth of cut than the studs were designed for. So constant depth of cut, meaning constant ROP, is really about trying to keep the depth of cut constant, which is ROP. And if I can keep that from taking a big bite, I may be able to protect the studs. The speed with which the rig can see things, make adjustments, the stored elasticity and weight you have in your string, all that's really complicated. So it's not a very slick answer. A slick answer is a device right above your bit that does that for you. And there's some of that kind of thing being worked on. I don't know what its status is right now as far as getting to the market, but you basically want a device that can react, analyze, diagnose, react really, really fast right above the bit to stop the big depth of cut bite. And I'm not sure that's out in the market right now. There are versions of that, but they may not be working great yet.
We do have another question here. Does it more effective to drill with an assisted RSS rather than conventional RSS? What about the time of the connection procedures with motor in the assembly and the risk of limiters associated to differential pressure? From Santiago.
It's funny when you ask multiple questions. I only remember the last one. But
Go for it, Fred.
The motor I'm a proponent of, if the motor's rated for pressure, run it, and not 80%, not 70%. If your vendor tells you statistically we find it lasts better at 80%, I would say statistically I should go find another vendor. And that's the way I feel about it, because don't rate it for what you can't run. Now, but let's be smart. I'm being a little bit wise ass there, but let's be smarter than that. Let's say what's limiting the motor from being run at 100, and you're going to find that it has a big bend in it. You're not taking care of running your string at non-resonant speeds, and you're just whirling it to death. You don't really have a motor differential problem. You got a motor wear problem, and those are almost always going to come back to whirl. So if you put that same motor that has been doing better at 80% of load, statistically, Go find out what its problem really is and address those things. And I think you'll be okay at 100, because motors get tested and they run 100 and they run 100% for long, long periods of time. If they don't do that in the field, it's because there's something happening to them in the field. And those are usually the issues. Whirl is usually the issue. The design we put in there contributes to it. Slick assemblies, high bends, and running resonant speeds are maybe the low-hanging fruit for getting more differential in your motor safely.
Oh, I'm posing this question in there, but it comes from somebody in the audience. What is the baseline MSE, and does it need a couple of wells to be able to correlate what the baseline MSE is?
No, I just showed you a picture of one well, one MSE curve. What you way to think about it is that it's the efficiency. If the MSE were on the straight line, I showed in that early plot, then that's as good as it can get. That's 100% efficient. So what you're really seeing when you watch the real MSE come back and not go further than here, rise, come back and not go further than here, rise, come back, where it comes back to is as efficient as it's ever going to get. I don't know that there's not still a lot of inefficiency in it, but it's as efficient as it's ever going to get. So just draw a line through the bottoms of that MSE curve, and you only need a few hundred feet of drilling to do it. And now you know what your baseline reference point is. No other well matters to you. You could go to another well, have a little higher mud weight, trigger ductile failure, and the baseline would move. Baselines move. The baseline MSE, what creates that, why it is what it is, and all that is a really fascinating long story, and it has lots of holes in it. It's where's the energy going? Where's the energy lost? If we could find all of that and understood everything in the baseline, we would know where to go find energy, and we'd drill faster. So that's a kind of a research area that's kind of intriguing. But the baseline actually rarely equals rock strength, ductile brittle. There are all kinds of issues that go on. The key is whatever the baseline is, that's what a sharp bit is doing. If it stops coming back to the baseline, it's going to be because your bit is not sharp.
I was just about to ask that if there's bit wear or if there's damage to the bit, the baseline moves over slightly, correct?
Well, that's not really what happens. Bits don't wear. They just don't. So if it moves over, it keeps going. Once you start, because it's not wear, it's damage.
Oh, yes.
Bits don't wear. So you've broken a stud, you've had a high whirl impact that sheared the diamond off the face, and now the stud's exposed to drill, it is really going to wear. So if it'll rise with whirl, episodes of whirl, you come back down. But if it ever takes off, if it's every damage typically progresses and progresses and progresses. You don't get a little damage, so it moves over, and then it stops getting any more damage. You've knocked a diamond off, whirl's going to go up, inbound, all kinds of. That's just experience, and I'm imagining things, but that's been the experience that when you pull a damaged bit, you can always kind of go back and see the last place it was green, and it's not very far up the hole.
All right.
But there's another very long trend you see that's confusing. You might think it's bit wear. It's actually motor wear. More and more fluid is bypassing your stator. And if you see a trend that's several hundred feet long, maybe 1,000 feet long, that's not bit wear. That's motor wear. You will actually sometimes pull that motor and it's got a green bit on it. So you know it wasn't bit wear. But that's the motor wear, and fluid bypass loses power, more and more power. And so to get the same ROP, you're running more weight on bit or something, you end up with more energy per rock volume. So MSE gets affected by motor wear.
So here's kind of an interesting question. Can you clarify if Limiter Redesign was behind the ExxonMobil Fast Drilling Process? It was largely successful in ExxonMobil Nigeria. It was later stopped. Do you know reason it was stopped?
Fast Drill was the name we gave using MSE in this process. And at some point, we discovered all these non-bit limiters, especially borehole misbehavior, instability, and how that limits your drill rate and such. So we expanded Fast Drill to add, we call it Fast Drill Borehole Management. And well, then we found out, we really started thinking about it. It's just whatever limits you. And I can't say it's borehole and I can't say it's the bit. It could be a manager who won't go to training. So we really need to conceptualize a limiter redesign as a whole. Also, flat time. At some point, we started working on flat time, which didn't fit neatly. So the way ExxonMobil sees it, limiter redesign is a big umbrella that has Fast Drill under it, kind of the rock cutting thing, borehole management, and flat time reduction. As far as stopping doing it, they haven't stopped doing it, but where limiter redesign has gone is the unconventionals, and ExxonMobil operates deepwater, extended reach, international. XTO operates the unconventionals, and so and XTO for years, the business management didn't want to mix the two because their business models are so different. XTO has a very different business model that's tailored to making money where they work. ExxonMobil's is tailored to Angola, where if you don't have a receipt, you don't get cost recovery. Your whole organizational focuses are so different, and risks are different, and all that. So XTO is it's in a place right now, and Exxon's international work is in a different place. And I think with everybody moving to Houston, things are happening. We'll see how that evolves.
So another one here from Mohammed. Can you please elaborate more about the importance of having accurate estimation of torque at bit to establish baseline MSE?
The baseline is a relativistic value, so accurate torque at bit is not important at all.
There you go.
Yeah. There's some other reasons you may want it, but not baseline surveillance.
So we've gotten a couple of other kind of like baseline questions, but then let me get to this one here. So I think Dave McNeil asked us a couple of times. With 6 to 8 HHSI in a 12 1/4 hole, how much weight on bit is lost in overcoming the pump off force?
None, because you bring your pumps up before you tag bottom. So if you think about it, if I say I got 40,000 pounds weight on bit, my pumps are already up. I've got the pressure drop and the hydraulic lift of the force coming through the nozzles, and that's in my tag up. So I'm zero. I zero when I tag up, and if I say I have 40, I have 40 beyond that. There is a hydraulic. If I change pump rate, then my tag up basically becomes incorrect, and I have more or less weight on bit, but we don't tend to do that very much. We bring our pumps up to full speed before we tag up.
All right, here's another great one. What about bit durability? Is that important now that we understand that PEC bit doesn't get worn but only damaged and dysfunction? How does a drilling engineer talk to bit vendors about such terms, bit durability, resistance to abrasiveness?
You determine your dysfunction. Now, abrasiveness is almost unimportant now, because when I was a young engineer, it was all bit wear was due to abrasiveness, and in reality, the early PDC diamonds were susceptible, but as diamonds progressed, and they're stunningly more wear resistant now, they just don't wear. All of those abrasive formations suddenly quit being abrasive. I don't know where they went. I mean, honestly, it was just really amazing to watch happen. They never were abrasive. They would, again, it was the sliding distance on the cutters, but the cutters weren't right to take as much sliding as they can now. Now you can slide them forever. But what was the start of that question there, David?
What about bit durability?
Okay, yeah. So durability has almost become a meaningless point, and there's a lot to that. When we started MSE, in 2004 and 5, long time ago. We immediately understood from the bit forensics that Whirl, we're only beating up the outside of the bit and all the cutters in the middle are green. This is Whirl, right? Well, we figured out that as you raise weight on bit, you indent your cutters more, and Whirl goes down. The bit Whirl goes down. The BHA is still doing what it's doing. It's trying to wag the bit around, but if I indent my cutters more, they're surrounded by more rock, and the bit just can't move. So the higher the weight on bit we ran, the less the whirl damage we had. Well, then, it occurs to you that, well, why don't I run a bit that indents more to start with at lower weight on bit to get those cutters surrounded by rock, meaning a more aggressive bit. So I would say within a year, we dropped a blade from every PDC bit in the world. It's amazing. We made them more aggressive, less so-called durable, right? Because durable doesn't even mean anything anymore with the PDC diamonds we have, except, some exceptions in some formations, but they're pretty rare. What we really want is the most aggressive bit we can that doesn't trigger stick slip, that doesn't have so much torque that we get stick slip in a given well with a given string with us right now. You find that by running your own step test, your well, your footage, your rig, your drill pipe, and either stick slip does or doesn't limit you. If it does, you might run depth of cut control. You probably don't add another blade though. Adding another blade is a very old way of thinking, and it's almost never the right answer. Except, I'm not going to say it's not ever the right answer, but it's the idea of making the bit tougher. It's solving a tougher problem is not right. It might be solving a specific dysfunction problem, like transitioning an interfacial severity zone. So the answer is understand your actual limiter, sit down with your vendor, look at the digital data with your vendor. By the way, give your bit vendors access to your real-time data. And I know people have proprietary issues and all that, but if you can do that, let them live some of this with you if they want to. But talk to your vendors about dysfunction, not bit wear, and ask them what they can do. It's more likely when it comes to Whirl and that you need to be talking to your directional company than your, because your bit's screwed on the end of this big sine wave, and it's a big old bent motor up there that's your sine wave. I mean, what's the poor thing supposed to do? But Whirl. So anyway, talk dysfunction, not ROP, not bit life.
Well, this comment here comes from Usama Sabir, who's a drilling engineer in Pakistan, who says, haha, bits don't wear now. That is what this paper is saying out loud. So love to have that comment in there. So I've got two last questions for you, Fred, and then we'll let you go. So one question is, will we be able to get the presentation and be able to put it online? I forgot to ask beforehand, but
yeah, it wouldn't have done any good because I finished it 5 minutes before we started. But I'll definitely get it to you, David.
No worries. So everybody out there that is watching, I will be sure to post that. Usually I post those on Tuesday, so we'll post Monday. Well, nope, next week. I don't think I'm going to have a show next week. I don't know. I mean, unless somebody comes back, unless you guys want Fred back for another one, we can cover the lateral. So that's the second question is, Fred, would you come back to the show again in the future? Can we get you?
Absolutely.
All right.
I always enjoy this, David. Appreciate the opportunity too.
Well, Fred, I always enjoy having you on the show because I get to learn so much. And really, this is all about me being selfish and getting to learn. And then I let other people tune in and watch. So it's kind of how this ends up turning out. Oh, wait, I got one more question because this is coming from Rick Allen, who's actually just in the other room. Fred, you met him when you came here to so downhole MSE calculated from surface. Is downhole MSE calculated from surface measurements?
No. Well, it can be. So we're writing a MSE standardization paper right now. I'm an ad hoc committee. And in that, we're going to explain a lot of that kind of thing. What are the errors in measurement? What are the errors in input? We're proposing a different MSE equation for a surface calculated MSE because we've had some confusion in the way it was being done. The motor MSE, though, we're not changing that at all. The downhole MSE will be the same. And most people aren't really using the surface MSE, so it's not a big deal. But we're going to try to correct that, and then we're going to try to provide a whole lot of the kind of background around tear, misunderstandings and stuff. You can take the surface torque, and K&M I think probably may have done this first, but take your surface torque, back out all the string torque, and get a bit MSE. So that's how you use surface data to calculate a bit MSE. I think that's being done, and there are people who have built systems that try to do that for those rigs that don't have a downhole MWD or a motor. If you've got an MWD or a motor, though, you wouldn't do that. You'd use the torque off the motor, and you would use the MWD torque. The thing about either is you're using weight on bit from your hook. So very few systems are using downhole weight on bit. So we do kind of make that assumption that whatever we're slacking off is getting slacked off, but and it's true if the string is rotating, but that's that story. That paper will probably be submitted to the journal. We'll see if they'll publish it. Maybe out early next year.
Well, it'll be about that time to have you come back on the show.
That'd be good.
If not sooner, if A&M and ExxonMobil allow it, or whoever the powers that may be allow you to just be able to keep dumping information onto the show. So Fred, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it, as always, and look forward to any more presentations or anything else that you might be doing out there with SBE or I know possibility of doing a podcast with K&M. So look forward to any of the other stuff that you guys got out there. So, hey, everybody, let you guys know, if you guys will, please like, share, subscribe. We're at 500 subscribers on the YouTube channel. I am looking to be able to get to 1,000, because when I get to 1,000, then I can broadcast live with my mobile platform, and I've got a really, really cool surprise that I want to be able to do for you guys. Don't want to discuss it too much just yet, but we're halfway there. So if you guys can, I really would appreciate that. Fred, any last words for everybody out there watching?
No, thank you, David. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, guys, if you guys have any questions that we didn't get to, feel free to email them over to me, and we'll line them up, and maybe we'll just do a full show of just Q&A with Fred, because I know there's always tons of questions that we don't get to. So, Fred, thanks so much for being here. And for everybody out there that is watching, as always, know your industry. And I forgot to line up the button this time. Golly, here we go. Where's it at? There we go.